Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is it working?
Madam Speaker, I was sitting here and I know that I have been here for quite some time. But I thought that this was a committee meeting. Am I good? If that's a committee meeting, are you in the right seat?
Member, in committee, you can and usually come down. Based on the volume of documents that I had on my desk, I decided to sit in the same place. However, I would be spoken to as chair, not Madam Speaker, at this time. Member, if you notice, the maze has been lowered as well. So we are in committee.
Madam Chair. It's not working. It's not working. It's still not working.
Check, check.
Members, I have completed my preamble. Minister.
Member.
I'm ready to commence, members.
Members, I would remind members of the Standing Finance Committee that to have a smooth process, that we highlight the part of the budget that we're asking in relation to, and that we proceed.
Minister of Finance,
Thank
you
you.
should commence.
Thank you.
Minister of Finance.
Check, check. Check, audio check.
Madam Chair.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. By now, Madam Chair, everyone knows that the Jamaican economy was significantly impacted on October 28th by Hurricane Melissa, which made landfall in Westmoreland. According to the PIOJ, the most severely impacted parishes included St. Elizabeth, St. James.
Minister of Finance not hearing you at all.
I don't know. I'll sit over there then.
I don't think you can.
Can we go over there?
No.
I know, I can't Madam Chair, are you hearing? Madam Chair, a little bit. Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Minister. A little clearer.
Madam Chair. By now, everyone knows that the Jamaican economy was significantly impacted on October 28th by Hurricane Melissa, which made landfall in Westmoreland. According to the PIOJ, there were several impacted parishes: Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, St. James, Hanover, Trelawney, St. Anne, and Manchester. The preliminary projection for real economic growth for fiscal year 2025-26 now stands at minus 4.3%, a decline compared to 2.2% at the time of the original budget. Nominal growth is now projected to be minus 0.2%. As a result, the central government's second supplementary estimates for fiscal year 2025-26, which was tabled on Tuesday, October 21, 2025, must now be significantly adjusted for the impact, both revenue and expenditure, on the budget arising from pre- and post-Hurricane Melissa matters. Whereas the second supplementary budget was projected to be in balance, the preliminary assessment is for the central government to now generate a fiscal deficit of 3.5%. The debt ratio is now projected to increase to 68.2% of GDP for this fiscal year. Having said that, Madam Chair, the government remains committed, even more so during this crisis, to prudent fiscal management. And with those opening words, Madam Chair, we will take any questions that there may be.
We will end up having to operate in the same way. If you are not finished speaking, please do not turn your mic off. That way, we go one by one in the order in which your mic was turned on. Are we clear? Member Robinson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have two procedural points.
Oh, sorry. My apology.
Madam.
Yes, I have two procedural points. One is a question, the other is a statement. Has there been significant changes to the supplementary since we approved it just now? And if so, could you walk us through what those major changes are? Because a document has been put here which seems lengthy, and it's important before we proceed that you let us know what those substantive changes are. So that's my first question.
Thank you, Member. So yes, there are some changes. There are some amendments to the third supplementary estimates. Those amendments include head 20,000. There was a typographical error in title on pages 20,000-1 to 20,000-8. The error should be corrected to read third supplementary estimates 2025-26. There's also an amendment of $747 million for the special end-of-year constituency-based disaster mitigation program to support urgent works such as drain cleaning, debushing, debris removal, and minor repairs, and these were inadvertently allocated on the head 15,000 Office of the Prime Minister. The Standing Finance Committee amendment shows the 850 million allocated to head 19,000, recurrent, Ministry of Economic Growth and Infrastructure Development, to be utilized by the NWA as follows: National Cleanup and Resilience Building Program, 630 million, and Targeted Responses to Urgent and Emerging Needs, 220 million. The third amendment is 1.7 billion.
Minister of Finance, I note that a member is holding up his hand. He's having the same challenge that we are having.
Yeah, following where
This
you
amendment
are.
is difficult to follow.
Follow is very difficult to
So
follow.
what would have been good is either we go in order of this amendment document, or all of us will have to sit and number it page 1 through, so that we know from whence you speak.
Yeah.
Madam
The
Speaker,
sections, the
are
heads that have several
Are there
sheets.
no notes on what you have?
No.
No,
So,
okay.
so those heads that have more than one page of amendment will show the head and page 1, 2. So as in head 20,000 has -1, 11, 1, and then nothing after that, 26, 1, 2600, 1, and then 2659, 1. But it is hard to follow for the members because the entire amendment document is one composite document without pages. So we may have to pause and all of us number our pages at this time, but in future it would be good for the Ministry of Finance if we have a bulk of amendments to have, before it's printed, the page numbering at the bottom or top of the document so that all of us can follow.
Can we copy this?
Yeah. So we can match back with the explanations.
I mean, Madam Speaker, we don't want to be difficult,
All
but
right,
difficult,
frankly,
you're
no,
reasonable.
I'm saying
Madam
it
Speaker.
really is
Reasonable.
difficult to follow
It's reasonable.
without a written
You're correct.
written document.
Absolutely reasonable. So members, let us all just number the pages that we have received. That's this amendment document in the interest of time.
These are the top, right?
And Minister of Finance, in referring to major amendments,
Madam
would
Chair.
refer to the page by
Madam
number.
Chair, Madam Chair, just to note, the heads are at the top left-hand
That-
corner.
That's not the challenge, Minister. It is because you have started to give explanation as to major changes. You started in the middle of the document at finance, but for all of us, we would have to be shifting through the document to try to find where you are. And it would be faster if the pages were all numbered, so you could refer to the page number, and it would allow all members in the committee to quickly go to where you're speaking from. I think we have about 14 pages, so everybody could just quickly number them.
You wanted an answer as to whether or not there were substantial changes. So either the thing has gone up or down.
But like the one for 600 million, that's a substantial change.
Yeah.
That's
But that is for our benefit.
Yes, absolutely.
So can't fight that.
No. But we want to highlight it.
So we have 14 pages in total, and in order to ensure that the Minister of Finance is able to speak from anywhere within the document, if we have all numbered the pages, then Minister of Finance, you can direct us to the page number as you go through your comments. Thank you.
Where's the education? Oh. Page 13. Culture. This one, 28. That is culture, 46,000. Page 14. Water. Water and environment. It's before, is after finance. When it's on page 8, page 8. Jesus. I'll start with page 4. Madam Chair. Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Oh, hold a moment, please, my Minister of Finance, just a moment. Minister Malou Ford, member.
But okay, now you said this was inadvertently already. All right. 1,500 is on page. That's page 4. That's page 4. No, this is page 4. Page 4? The 1,500. Yeah, 1,500 is page 4. So you're removing it from 1,500 to 19 to 1,900. 19,000, yeah. 19,000. Which is on page 5. Oh, God. All right, let's wait. So where's the arrow? Where's the arrow? It's the allocation. That's what's the third supplement. No, this one.
All right, members, we are back. Let me apologize for the interruptions. Just a reminder, before we go ahead, 2 things. Number 67 in the standing orders, page 42, supplementary appropriations bill. Just a reminder for all of us, where a supplementary appropriations bill is presented in accordance with section 116 of the Jamaica Constitution, Order in Council 1962, then the debate on the second reading thereof shall be strictly confined to the matters for which additional expenditure is required, and when the question thereon has been agreed to, the bill shall not be committed, and the question that the bill now be read a third time shall be put forthwith without amendment or debate. So particularly pointing out additional expenditure is what we should be discussing at this time. Another point to make, Minister, in the House, the chair of the PAAC pointed out certain concerns coming from the PAAC meeting in his report. He would have also sent it to the Ministry of Finance, and he is hoping that in our discourse, those issues raised would also be attended to. It would have been sent to the Ministry of Finance yesterday, so you could indicate if you are, and you actually also acknowledge receipt at Finance. I'm not sure whom at Finance. So FS, Minister, you could speak to that. And if not, Minister, you may want to have the team still take a look at those concerns in the event that assistance is needed in being able to respond to those issues coming from the PAAC report.
Madam Chair, I am being advised by the FS that she's not in receipt of the questions.
Let me allow the chair of PAAC, Member Bunting, go ahead.
What I will just assist, the committee clerk had sent the draft report of the PAAC to the Ministry of Finance. We, in fact, got feedback from them. And to assist, I have here an extra copy of the report and the 6 points I highlighted in my opening contribution to the debate on the motion to facilitate. I'll share this with the officials.
Thank you, Member. So, Minister of Finance, you may commence. And my understanding from Member Bunting, who chairs the PAAC, is that incorporated in these deliberations and discussions, he would love to be able, for the benefit of all, to have responses to those areas raised from the Ministry of Finance.
All right. Madam Chair, I will start with the amendments to the third supplementary estimates while my technical team looks at the questions that were raised.
Captain, definitely we're having a problem with the mic.
So, Madam Chair,
that is better.
Madam Chair, I'll begin with the amendments to the third supplementary estimates. Just to note that on page 6, there's a typographical error in the title. On pages, well, the head number 20,000-1 to 20,000-8, and the error was corrected to read third supplementary estimates 2025-2026. On page 4, Madam Chair, Office of the Prime Minister, 747 million for the special end-of-year constituency-based disaster mitigation program to support urgent works such as drain cleaning, debushing, debris removal, and minor repairs were inadvertently allocated under head 15,000, page 4, Office of the Prime Minister. The Standing Finance Committee amendment shows the 850 million allocated to head 19,000, which is page 5, recurrent, Ministry of Economic Growth and Infrastructure Development, to be utilized by the NWA as follows: National Cleanup and Resilience Building Program, 630 million, and Targeted Responses to Urgent and Emergent Needs, 220 million. Madam Chair,
It's a 630, and then the 220 is
a third amendment relates to $1.7 billion transferred from head 20,000. If you'll go to page 6, head 20,000, Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, Hurricane Melissa contingency, to the head 42,000, Ministry of Education, Skills and Information. Sorry, let me go that again, Madam Chair, sorry. 1.7 billion was transferred from head 20,000, and you'd see that on page 6. Head 20,000 is the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, and that was transferred to head 42,000, which is the Ministry of Education, Skills and Information, and that's reflected on page 13. And that is to be
Minister, it says head 41,000, and you're saying 42,000. Let us just confirm. Minister of Education. 1,000, Minister.
additional requirement.
That's correct. That's correct, Madam Chair. It should be 41,000. Minister of Education and Skills, and that will be reflected on page 13. Page 13. Yep.
Since you're on that point, can you just indicate the additional amounts are for? Is that for repairs to schools, etc., arising from Melissa?
Yes. Yes. Hurricane Melissa, relief and response. Ministry of Education.
I know colleagues will have some follow-up questions specific to areas in their constituencies and schools, but I just wanted a broad answer as to what it represented.
Madam Chair, amendment number 4 would be $280 million for the Ministry of Culture for hurricane-related expenditure, and that will be reflected on page 14 of the report that you have. And there's $91 million to
Minister?
head 22.
Minister? You should best start with the page number so persons can get to the page
Page
number
14.
that you're speaking from, not say it at the end.
Please go to page
14, right.
Madam Chair. There you will see the allocation of $280 million to the Ministry of Culture for hurricane-related expenditure. And then finally, Madam Speaker, on page 8, you will see $91 million to head 22,000, which is water, environment, and climate change for administrative expenses. Amendments to other heads are mainly reallocations requested by the MDAs.
All right, thank you, Minister. Before I go to
Hold on, member. Repeat your last statement, Minister.
The
last sentence you said amendments.
I said amendments to other heads are mainly reallocations requested by MDAs. Within MDA.
Ministries, agencies, and departments.
Thank you, Minister.
Minister, before I go to my substantive questions, I would also like to highlight that going forward, the report from the Independent Fiscal Commission should be tabled at the same time that the supplementary is tabled. I know you have done so today, and I see it as one of the tabled documents, but it's important for our own analysis of the supplementary. And I know it's not required by law for you to do so, but for good governance and transparency, that we have it at the same time as the supplementary going forward, so we can have an independent analysis of what you are presenting to us. In terms of my...
Member, just to note that that report, when asked for, it was sent to Parliament within a day or two.
I know, no. So I see it as a table document today, but I'm just saying going forward, when it is sent to you by law, and I'm just asking if we are, for future reference, when you table the supplementary, that you table it at the same time, so we have the benefit of it prior to it being tabled now. In terms of the substantive question, first one relates to JPS. I have seen in the media where you have finalized the terms of the loan to the JPS. Could you indicate what those terms are in terms of the tenor of the loan and the interest rate? And I ask within the context of a concern that consumers will have about being charged higher bills to facilitate the repayment of this loan. So that's my first question.
Well, remember, the terms of the loan to JPS is 5 years at 5.5%.
Can you indicate which government agency is the official agency providing the loan?
Ministry of Finance and the Public Service.
Or the ministry directly? Okay. There was, related to JPS, there was a allocation or a figure of 450 million US, not in the supplementary, but part of the overall loan package that the international financial institutions were providing as part of the $6.7 billion. Could you provide some clarity as to what that 450 million US allocated or earmarked for JPS would be used for?
So, member, the Ministry of Energy could give you further details, but in essence, this facility would be available to JPS, as they had indicated that there was a need for additional funding, where we would like for the 150 million that was allocated to them as a loan, for that to come back to us out of this facility, but all of that is left to be worked out.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, we have provided an upfront loan of 150. The international financial institutions have made a provision of 450 million, which JPS can draw down on and use that to repay the government the 150. Is that correct?
Just so you're aware, member, it's not something that is in place yet, but contemplated.
No, I
but
know.
those
That's
are
why I
some
say
of the-
earmarked and not definitive. But it's important to understand what it is earmarked for and what is the thinking, because obviously there would have been discussions between the government of Jamaica and the IFIs around this facility. And since the figure is there, we just want clarity on it.
Very, very preliminary discussions, member.
Very preliminary. So when will you be in a position, I had asked you at the last sitting, to provide greater detail in terms of the 6.7 billion. We know 2.4 is private sector mobilization funding, but the direct government of Jamaica borrowing, when will you be able to tell us specifics on that in terms of the amounts from institutions, interest rates, length of period to pay, whether there's moratoria, etc.? When can you provide that to the House?
So, member, the announcement was made last week, and as you can imagine, with these kinds of facilities, there are many conversations, many rounds of meetings to happen. We are in the early days following this announcement, so please allow us some time. Obviously, government has to look at its priority projects. It has to look at the timing of those projects. There is quite a bit to be worked out, member, which would not be possible to bring to the House in a week.
Okay, I understand that, but would you be in a position to say when? And I asked that within the context, you have made projections around our debt to GDP ratio, moving up to 68% and moving higher. I assume those projections would account for what you anticipate that you intend to borrow to deal with the gaps that arise from the fall off in economic income activity and taxable income.
All right. The 68% debt to GDP that you referenced, member, is what we're projecting by the end of this fiscal year, which will be in another 3 months. And all, if not most of that, is primarily due to the decline in the GDP. As we look out in the medium term, that's where you would see reflected any drawdowns on these facilities that have been announced.
So no new borrowing for this fiscal year up to March 2026.
So in this fiscal year, member, there is a little bit of borrowing, but not enough to move the needle significantly.
All right, since you have not finalized the arrangements, is there a contemplation to negotiate within these facilities? There is a specific climate provision, and I think Barbados has piloted that, where in the event of a natural disaster, that there is a waiver of suspension of payments of interest and principal. We don't have that. Is that something we are going to do going forward, given that we haven't finalized the negotiation of these facilities?
Those are conversations we've had specifically with the president of the IDB in particular, and with representatives of the World Bank, but to be finalized.
And then my final question, I've highlighted a number of times the chronic underspend of our capital budget. I know efforts have been made to address the procurement issues. There was a reallocation of $2 billion in this particular supplementary away from the capital budget. Can you indicate the specific steps that are being taken to ensure that we can, in fact, spend the allocations that are provided within the budget and within the context where there is such a great need now in this rebuilding exercise to have capital projects executed on time?
Well, for this fiscal year so far, member, as you would probably know, we did have a hurricane, and that would have slowed some of the capital spending that we have to do for this year. But in terms of going forward and the reconstruction efforts that would need to be on the way, you would have heard the Prime Minister talk about the National Recovery and Reconstruction Authority, an entity to coordinate the work that needs to be done for reconstruction, an entity that's supposed to be nimble in terms of its efforts and its coordination. So there's great expectation that as we go forward, that you will see, a better utilization of the capital that needs to be spent, especially for reconstruction.
Minister, you know very well that the...
I'm sorry, it's the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority.
No, but we know the problem of under expenditure on the capital budget is not specific to Hurricane Melissa or Hurricane Beryl. It's certainly for the last 4, maybe 5 fiscal years, we have had significant under expenditure. Now, is it that you're suggesting that NARA will be able to operate more efficiently and effectively than normal central budget and normal central government and the MDAs? Are there revised procurement guidelines that will be available to that agency so that they can actually spend the money?
So for the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority, we are expecting that it will operate under emergency procurement rules, but also that it will have the ability to engage significantly large companies to help us in terms of having a faster pace at the reconstruction.
All right, thank you. I'll turn it over to my colleagues who have other questions.
Thank you.
Member Bunting is first, and then Member Hilton.
Thank you. Minister, a number of issues were highlighted.
Member Bunting, hold on a moment. Member Hilton says he has a procedural question. So could we allow him to go ahead of you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I wanted to, we were told that 3 ministries, the focus will be on 3 ministries. My question then is, for the other ministries for which there may be questions, is the Ministry of Finance the appropriate body to direct those questions to?
They are here based on what House Leader had said. So the other ministries are here who will come and answer the questions in respect of those 3 ministries, separate and apart from the Ministry of Finance.
Okay, good.
So 3 ministries in all. So
are you asking that outside of the 3, right?
Yes, outside of the 3.
I'm wondering if we would want to invite in everybody at the same time. So, or right, because it's outside of this.
The 3.
Outside. Oh no! So yes, the Ministry of Finance procedurally would be required to answer any question that comes up outside of the 3, because we indicated, the House Leader, in discussion with the opposition, that they only had questions for those 3 ministries, and moved that we release them. So they would have been released and they have gone back to the ministry.
Right.
That's what I understand to have occurred.
Yes.
So they would not be here. If the Ministry of Finance is able to answer any questions that we have for any ministry outside of that, they may. However, one would want to be understanding and possibly find a mechanism to get some written responses if we have questions for other ministries, to be fair to them.
Yeah, but you know,
Follow up?
no, I hear. I just think, given the nature and the times that we are having this.
Given the
particular-
nature and all of that, we should not have made a decision collectively to release them.
I don't know
We
about
were all
collective.
in favor, so
I don't know
you
about
may not have
collectively.
heard. So we sent them back to their substantive work. Member Bunting?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Minister, in the report of the PAAC, we noted that the fiscal policy paper was tabled more than 2 months late, in clear breach of Section 48E of the FAA Act. Would you explain why this occurred? This was before Melissa, so we can't blame Melissa for this one. It was due by the end of September. Could you explain why this occurred and what is the corrective action being taken to ensure it does not reoccur? That's the first question.
So, member, there were intervening events. As you may recall, there was an election, and then right after we came back into government, we had the hurricane. And so those events.
But Minister, with
influence.
respect, I think the financial secretary and her team were campaigning in the election. So that doesn't provide an excuse for why they did not have.
Member Hilton?
So I'm advised by the FS that the FPP fiscal policy paper interim requires policy decisions. So it's not something that the it's not something that the technocrats at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service can finalize by themselves and bring to Parliament. They just had to wait until the new government was in place, with ministers assigned to ministries, and ministers had to come in and get used to their brief. So that explains it, member.
There are other concerns that were raised regarding, for example, the inadequacy of the allocation to the Ministry of Education, which I have seen amendments now, which has quadrupled the allocation to the Ministry of Education in these amendments that you've just tabled this afternoon. So when we come to OPM and education, members of the committee will further interrogate on those issues.
So member, there is an allocation to the Ministry of Education that would take them through the end of this fiscal year. There are, as we look at the fiscal years ahead, there will be even more significant allocation, right? In this budget, there is about 1 point, how much is it? 1.7? It's now 2.3 billion in this budget. 2.3, right, with the amendment, there will be 2.3 billion in this budget. Right, but it increased to 2.3 billion, and in subsequent fiscal years ahead, there will be significant allocation.
Yeah. Member Crawford is next, going from Member Hilton's procedural question as it relates to the supplementary estimates, where there are additional questions, Minister of Finance and FS. The members are asking that every effort be made to respond, because there are, in keeping with what I read earlier in terms of appropriations bill, the right to ask question in respect of any increases. And therefore, as much as is possible, it is being encouraged to respond to the increases wherever they may be. In the event that we are not able to respond, then we would provide a response at a later date. But every effort should be made to respond. Member Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Minister, the loan to JPS of approximately 23 billion Jamaican, is that in addition to the 45 million US dollars that they received from the self-insurance?
Yeah, member, the 150 million is a loan from the Ministry of Finance, and well, it's a loan from the government, operationalized by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. In terms of their insurance payments, that question would have to be put to the respective ministry. I don't have the, okay, from the OUR. It has nothing to do with the loan. It's separate from the loan.
So that is separate from the loan?
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right. So in addition, all right. So the JPS loan that was given by the Ministry of Finance, do you have the current interest rate that was agreed to?
5.5%.
5.5%. Are we correct that the projected rate of borrowing that the government can achieve is approximately 12 to 15% projected?
I'm sorry, projected based on what? 12. Can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, the documents that we have seen suggest that if the government was to borrow, the interest rates that they'll likely be able to achieve was approximately 12 to 15%. Is that correct?
Absolutely not. Significantly lower.
It will be significantly lower. Do you have an estimate of the rates that the government will be able to borrow?
The average rate is member, and if you look at our debt profile publication, you will see that it is in the single-digit range.
Yes, so can you give me a better understanding? Is it 3%, 7%, 8%?
So member, as you can imagine, our source of financing, there are different sources of financing. You have the commercial market, commercial market local, commercial market international. You have our international partners, and in each of those, the rate would be different. International partners, very low single digit. Domestic market, single digit as well. International market, single digit. So if you were to average that across the entire portfolio, it still comes back to a single digit number.
Yeah, Madam Minister, single digit can vary from 10 to 9. So I'm asking if you can give us a ballpark, a range of where the average interest rate would be.
All right, so member, just to direct you, there is a publication that's done. It's called our medium-term debt management strategy. This one goes from fiscal year 2025 to 2026 to fiscal year 2028-29, and it goes in great detail about the loan portfolio. And as I flip through the pages, you will note that on, let me get to it. All right, so if we look at our domestic interest rate, it's about no, this is not. All right, so member, it goes anywhere from a low of 3.3% to 8.5%, depending on the instrument and the market in which we borrow and the currency.
All right, so thank you, Minister. As it relates to the 3.6 billion US dollars, approximately, that's what, 500 billion Jamaican, is any portion of that to be in this supplementary budget?
Oh, none of that is in this fiscal year's
None of
figures.
that is in this fiscal year. If we can go back to the 34 billion for JPS, how would that impact the liquidity and the ability to implement projects going forward this year into this budget?
How would that impact the government?
Yes, to do the housing, the water, the food packages, the removal of that 25 billion in a loan to JPS, how would that impact the budget's
It
ability?
does not. We have ample liquidity to manage what we, set out to do this fiscal year.
Okay. What's the estimated impact of this 3.6 billion on the debt to GDP ratio moving forward?
So, member, we're not gonna take everything on our books all at once. We will be very careful about the drawdown on these facilities that are available to us. As you can imagine, these facilities are to enable us to do big projects that would add to the GDP growth. These projects are going to be over 1, 2, maybe 3 fiscal year.
Yes.
So there will be a time frame over which these loans would be drawn down as the projects.
So
play
considering
themselves
so first question, did the Prime Minister misspoke when he said that over 3 years we'll be doing the drawdown? Did he misspeak?
The announcement, the headline announcement was 3 years
Yes.
from our international partners. But member, it's going to depend on the pace of government.
So it might not be
Alright.
3 years.
It will depend on the pace of government.
Okay. So do we have any estimate based on different scenarios over 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, what will be the impact on the debt to GDP ratio?
We've put forward so in our fiscal policy paper memo, we have put out some estimates of
Yes.
where the debt to GDP is expected to be after we hit the 68.3% this year. We are expecting recovery, as we've seen with other disasters. If you look back on Beryl last year, within 2 quarters, we were able to begin to see economic recovery. I'm not saying within 2 quarters we will see that with Melissa, but there is expectation that GDP will begin to grow again. And together with the capital spending that we need to do and the drawdowns, those have been worked into the estimates that we've put out.
Can you give me that estimate, or is it available?
All right. So we have some preliminary estimates in this medium-term publication as we concretize the projects, and we know the life cycle of the projects, and we know the drawdowns. Those will be reflected in numbers in the future. But these are our preliminary estimates that we lay out in the fiscal policy paper interim report.
And at its peak, what is the debt to GDP ratio based on your estimates? What's the peak debt to GDP ratio?
68.3%.
So after the addition of the loans, we expect that the growth would be sufficient to maintain a debt to GDP ratio of 63.8%?
68.3% at the end of this fiscal year 25-26, by the time we get to the end of it. And then as we go forward, we're expecting recovery in our GDP. We are expecting projects to pick up. We're expecting economic activity, and you can see the trajectory for our debt to GDP in these papers. So we're expecting to begin to see a decline again in the debt to GDP.
So based on your estimation, over the next 5 years, the debt to GDP ratio should not be greater than 68.3%?
That is our early estimate.
What is the growth rate that you have used to make this estimation? The expected growth rate to make this estimation?
All right, so member, over the medium term, in terms of real GDP growth, we're looking at 0.7 next year, 3.1 fiscal year 2027-28, and 1% fiscal year 2028-29. And that's the real GDP growth. Obviously, nominal GDP growth would be different numbers.
So our estimation, if we take the full sum loans, are that rates of growth of 3% or less would be able to keep us at 68.3%?
No, we're not going to be kept at 68.3%. With the hurricane this year, our estimation that we will end this fiscal year 2025-26, which comes to a close at the end of March of next year, that when we look at our debt to GDP, then it will be in the range of about 68.3%, primarily due to the decline in the GDP.
Okay, let me correct my question. Are you suggesting that it's going to be 68.3% or lower at rates of growth of 3% or averaging that 3%?
Yes, we're expecting it to be lower, member.
Okay. Now, we have also seen in the fiscal paper that there's a target of 60% by 2030. I figure you'll be taking that today as well. However, have you done any estimates on the level of surplus that we'd have to sustain to achieve that?
All right, so member, or preliminary estimate to achieve a 60% debt to GDP would be by the end of fiscal year 2029-2030.
Do you have an estimate of what the surplus levels would have to be?
So, member, as you can imagine, as we move forward, we will have greater clarity in terms of the growth from the various sectors that have been decimated by the hurricane. We'll have greater clarity about agriculture, about tourism, about the business sector, just about growth in general. But sitting here today, we have to look into the future and give our best estimate. Those estimates are subject to change up or down as we get greater clarity in terms of our growth rates, as we get greater clarity in terms of the projects requiring spending, and as we get better clarity just about the needs coming from the ministries, departments, and agencies.
Okay. There was enrolled in the grand announcement of $6.7 billion, a private sector loan of $2.4 billion. I think US dollars. I think MP from where Julian is from again, Southeast St. Andrew, had asked the question, is this dependent on the appetite of the private sector for loans?
I would say yes, but also
That's why I stop answer you.
recall that there are many projects that government may need to get done, that it could enter into PPP agreement with the private sector and so on. So it's government and the private sector working together in terms of the priority for that part of the loan.
I don't think I got the answer. Is it dependent on the appetite of the private sector, or is it something that government can also participate in?
Right at this moment, it's earmarked for the private sector, but as I'm indicating, there are big projects that I know government would love to get done, that it could do in collaboration with the private sector. For example, it could be structured as a public-private partnership.
So in the case of a public-private partnership, that the private component is the only part that can come from the 2.4 billion, or also the government's involvement can come from the 2.4 billion?
The 2.4 is for the public sector.
Is for the public sector?
I'm sorry, for the private sector as
So
far
if
as
there's
my
a
information
public-private
goes.
partnership where the government is spending $1 billion and the private sector is spending $1 billion, can the government also benefit from this 2.4, or only the private sector component?
Remember, at this moment, the 2.4 billion would be coming from the private sector arm of the multilaterals.
So essentially the government can't participate. Now, the Prime Minister have indicated that there were previous projects before Beryl. Were the previous private entities, and didn't they already identify capital if there were previous agreements?
Minister, if you could, I'm sorry, member, if you could add a little bit more color to that. I don't know exactly what it is that you're talking about.
In the House, the Prime Minister indicated that they were likely to take up the loan because they were previous projects that were in train. Wouldn't those previous projects already identify capital, or would those previous projects would have just been sitting in limbo without any identification of capital?
Chair, I think while the member does have some latitude in committee, which I think he rightly directed his questions initially around things like interest rate and loans. I believe now he's going a little bit outside of what we're here to discuss today. Not to say his questions aren't relevant for another space and time, but not for this supplemental budget exercise. So I would ask the member just to bear that in mind.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to come back inside and ask my final question.
Where were you, member?
I was outside.
Where were you?
I was outside, so I've got to come back inside. There was a correction made today with a movement from the Ministry of Education from 616 million to 2.31 billion, 2,316 million. Was that a correction of a mistake, or was that a conversation that they had post the PAAC?
Okay, member, we had provided a contingency for Melissa, and it was out of that that allocation was taken for the Ministry of Education. Once we determined what it is, they could spend during the financial year. We had to. It's a transfer of the funds, based on their assessment of their need.
You turned off your mic by mistake, Member Crawford? If you are finished, the next person is huh? Who has been waiting patiently. Member Newell.
Thank you, Chair. So, Minister, what I want to find out is whether the increased allocation to the Ministry of Education is the correction of an error, or it is a fresh allocation based on new information post the PAAC. Yeah, but the answer wasn't, the response was not. She didn't answer the question.
So, member, there's an amount that was put into the contingency fund in finance specifically to finance those requests, those Melissa-related requests when they come in. As you know, well over, I think the number is about 160 or 68, 168 or so schools were damaged. The Ministry of Education had to send out their assessors to assess the damage. We knew that they would come with a significant request, and so that allocation in the contingency would be taken out at that time when they come, you know, with the size and the quantum of their request.
So is it that ahead of the tabling of the supplementary last week, this information was not available because it was not placed there? So it suggests that it is either an error or new information came in. I'm not clear what it is. So was it just a placeholder last week?
So I'm advised by the FS that the details just was not available at the time of preparation of the document.
Okay, so you used the best figure that you had at the time.
So used it, right, and again, the amount that's set aside for Melissa contingency was the account out.
No, I'm clear on the set aside, Minister. What I wasn't clear on is the significant difference that would have, which I welcome because 1 million per school was way inadequate.
No, that was just for cleanup.
15,007, Minister. I want to direct you there. On page 4 on the revised, the amendment. Last week at PAAC, we had asked for an explanation on the 848,400,000, which the supplementary budget said was additional requirement for the Constituency Development Fund. And we were unable to place it in terms of the information we have where the CDF is concerned. Your revised numbers indicate that 747,400 of that have been moved to the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, and infrastructure development for implementation of the special end-of-year constituency-based disaster mitigation. That leaves $101 million, which I'm assuming the remark and classification remains, which is additional requirement for the Constituency Development Fund. Can you explain?
All right, I'm advised that the 747 million for the special end-of-year constituency-based disaster mitigation was placed in head 1500, which is the office, 15,000, which is the office of the Prime Minister, but it was inadvertently allocated there. So it has been transferred since then to head 1900, which is the Ministry of Economic Growth and Infrastructure Development, to be utilized by the NWA as follows: National Cleanup and Resilience Building Program, 630, and targeted responses to urgent and emerging needs, 220 million.
Which leaves a balance of $101 million. Can you indicate what that represents and whether it's still under the classification of additional requirement for the Constituency Development Fund?
So, member, instead of 747, it's now 850.
Well, what I'm seeing, Minister, on page 4 of your revised document, I'm seeing 747, which was revised from OPM. So I'm trying to get an understanding of the remainder.